Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President and CEO of Innocentive, Dwayne Spradlin. Fanfare, fanfare.
Thank you very much. I am CEO of Innocentive. We're an organization that delivers open innovation solutions to some of the largest companies in the world, ranging from Procter & Gamble to even government nonprofit organizations like NASA and the Rockefeller Foundation. We say we're innovating the way we innovate. It's with that passion for innovation that it's a distinct pleasure this morning to introduce the next speaker. He's a true innovator. Forbes magazine said that he was one of the top 10 innovators of the last decade. Fast Company said that he was one of the 50 most important innovators likely to change the way we work and live in the next 10 years. He has been out there on the forefront in many different areas. You may know him well by his work in healthcare, where he ran the company Minute Clinic, which was a true business innovation in delivering retail health care. So with that, it is my discreet pleasure to introduce Michael Howe to the stage.
Good morning. What I'm hoping to do is build on Dr. Porter's comments from this morning and give you a real live example of innovation in healthcare. I'd also like to offer you a structure for that innovation that hopefully you can take some of the principles back that we used to your own organizations. Now, before I start, I do need to make a couple of confessions. As it was said in the introduction, I am not from healthcare. I actually came to Minute Clinic as CEO of Arby's, the restaurant chain. Yes, I know. Everybody's out there laughing, saying, okay, here's your penance. You make them fat, now you got to cure them. We also heard commercials in Fighting Minute Clinic talking about, do you really want a prescription with your fast food? All right. Anyway, I came into it with a completely blank slate about healthcare. I recognized that the healthcare piece of it wasn't what I was bringing. It was the business innovation. And it's really the challenge I want to throw out to you as employers, as business leaders. Healthcare is broken. And I'm not quite as optimistic as Dr. Porter. I would tell you that reform to date that's come out of Washington is basically a three-card monte game. It was designed to distract us from the real issues in healthcare. Yes, expanding coverage is a great idea. Giving people the ability to pay for health services is part of the problem. But coverage doesn't provide access. The state of Massachusetts proved that. They proved that even when they mandated health insurance, access was almost impossible for new patients. So healthcare needs all of us. And so I'm here today to kind of stand up, give you some background on Minute Clinic, show you a case study of how we used a different approach to bring innovation to healthcare, but also to give you the principles we use so that you can take them with you. Those principles were really around pace. It was the purpose. What was the purpose of the innovation? Acceptability of the users. We needed to make sure the consumers understood what we were doing. It's a culture of innovation. How do you create a culture that engages everyone? And finally, it's the external barriers. What are you going to meet as you move that innovation out? So before we get into each one of these and how they applied to Minute Clinic, let me give you a little bit of background on Minute Clinic itself. For those of you that don't know, Minute Clinic was the intersection of retail and healthcare. We brought retail service principles to healthcare quality. The idea was to take a nurse practitioner and place them in a retail environment using retail service principles to provide a better experience and better access at a lower cost. The thought was really to focus on simplicity, consistency, functionality, but most of all, confidence. We were introducing something totally new, and we had to create confidence in the user. We also grew the concept very quickly. In a 3-year period, we grew from 19 clinics in 2 states with 81 employees. 3 years later, we were 530 clinics in 27 states and almost 3,000 employees. Explosive type of growth. Now, what was interesting about it was that the consumer reaction to it was extremely positive. And I'll give you some exact numbers as to kind of how people reacted to this. But what was interesting was the media's reaction. Now, keep in mind, we had a 3-year period, 2005 to 2008. In that 3-year period, we built, geographically speaking, the largest healthcare organization in the United States. We covered more geography, more locations than any other healthcare organization. Now, that should tell you something is wrong with our system. And over the 2 years, from 2006 to 2007, the media picked up on Minute Clinic as an innovation. In that 2-year period, there were 1,200 news articles and segments aired, not just in the US, but around the world. We were interviewed by news crews from Japan, Brazil, Spain, Canada. People were constantly coming, wanting to know what we were doing. This was truly, in their minds, the first innovation in healthcare delivery. But probably the most, I think, impactful and probably most relevant article that was written about Minute Clinic was the one that was mentioned in the introduction. It was the Forbes magazine in October 2007 that identified the 10 biggest innovations of the last decade. Now look at the list. There's a lot of stuff up there that you'd expect. BlackBerry, Google, Netflix. But in it was Minute Clinic. Now the interesting thing is, it's the only healthcare innovation up there. With all of the science of healthcare, Minute Clinic was chosen because of the impact it had on delivery. So, how did we do it? Well, we used these principles. And let me take you through each one and show you how we applied them to the definition, the expansion, and the evolution of the innovation in healthcare. Purpose. Our purpose at Minute Clinic was simple. We wanted to redefine healthcare in America. And we were going to do that by integrating healthcare into the consumer's lifestyle. Now, interesting, integration in healthcare always talks about integration of all the solutions in one spot. All you have to do is come to me, I'll take care of everything. That was integration. But from a business perspective, we felt integration was, we want to be part of your lifestyle. We really approached it more from the thought of an ATM, of financial services, simple financial services that could be in your pathway, that could provide you the access that you needed when you needed it. So when we looked at the redefinition of healthcare, we also had some operational concerns that we had to approach. It had to be high quality care. It had to be lower cost. We had to improve access, ease of use. There had to be some acceptance of the healthcare system as it was. We couldn't put ourselves out so far in innovation that we'd be the pariah. We would be completely separated from the rest of the system. So as we defined the purpose, we also defined how we would execute that purpose. So now that we've defined what it was we wanted to do, the next step was to really understand how would consumers react to it. We needed to understand their motivation. We needed to understand their expectation. What was missing for them? Now, to you, that seems pretty logical. But we wanted to take it a step further and said, we also need to understand the motivations of the staff. Because this is truly a service interaction. There are two people involved, the provider and the patient. So we looked at what was it that was causing some of the problems that we were hearing from patients. And the interesting thing that we found was it was a dramatic difference in the generation that each of them came from. The generational values that people had that came into the healthcare expectation affected what they were looking for. So what we did was we studied the 4 generations that healthcare was providing. Now, basic psychology will tell you that the development of values is the same for all of us. Basically, you start at infancy to age 4 to 6, and it's formed by your family. Most of your values will come from your family interactions. Then from 5 to 12, somewhere in that range, you start to do comparative. You start to get involved in school. You start looking, gee, things are different. You start to wonder, why does somebody do it differently? Then the wonderful years, all of you that have children, the wonderful teenage years. Yeah, thank you. It's the questioning stage. Wait a minute, Tommy doesn't have to go to bed till 9:30. Why do I have to go to bed at 9? You know, it's challenge. They want to push. They challenge your values. The final one is the experimentation, which really comes from about 18 to 22, and most of your values that you carry into adult life are formed by the time you're 22 or 24. Now think about the experimentation you did during that period of time. So you can see, if the process is the same, why are the values so different? And the answer is the context in which they're formed. Think about the differences in the 4 generations. Let's take war. War for the greatest generation was an honor. It was a wonderful thing. Their heroes were Sergeant York. You know, it was the fireside chat from FDR. Baby boomers. War was the Vietnam War. Suddenly, you had media in the front. You had people questioning, why are we there? What's the purpose? The greatest generation was very clear. They were saving the world. And they did. But the boomers looked at Vietnam and said, this isn't right. Now take it to the Gen X, Gulf War. Suddenly it becomes very sterile. It's a video game. The technology has advanced to the point where it's almost shocking. I served in the Air Force, and it was amazing to me that when a friend of mine's son came back, he brought back a videotape of his missions, and actually brought back a videotape of the bombs that he dropped and how each one hit their targets. It was completely different. Now, fast forward to the millennials. War is now undefined. Every one of us is a combatant. Things like Columbine, and you have to think of that as warfare. Terrorists, not just external, but internal. When you think about the federal building, suddenly things are changed. Economic differences, you know, the Great Depression, the great prosperity of the boomers, you know, the greed and the overwhelming corporate corruption of the Gen Xers as they saw, what was the Michael Douglas great movie, Wall Street? Remember his famous line? Greed is good. So it was a very different economic time that these values were formed in. And so as a result, what you see and what's relevant to healthcare is the institutional assessment. The greatest generation saw things like the Great Depression being solved by government's intervention with work projects. They saw things like World War II, Hiroshima and Pearl Harbor. They saw cause and effect. They saw the value of institutions. And as they look at healthcare, they'll tell you that we benefit from a strong institution. And if you think about it, it even entered into their workplace attitudes. The boomers, on the other hand, as their values were being formed, they protested. The members of the boomers generation said, wait a minute, I'm not going to Vietnam. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in people being beat up because the color of their skin is different. I want to change the world. And you saw campus sit-ins. You saw individuals believing they could change the institution by getting involved. Gen Xers looking at institutions saying, you know what, they're there to be interactive. The Gen Xers grew up as latchkey kids. Baby boomers, double income, big work ethic. And so Gen Xers grew up as latchkey kids, and they felt a need for self-sufficiency very quickly. And as a result, they'll tell you that as they look at institutions, they expect it to serve them. And the millennials are interesting because they'll look at it and say, they need to support our needs. The millennials are the most protected and most threatened generation we've seen so far. And we're seeing it in the way that they interact with the institution. Now, another example is technology. Think about technology for a minute. The greatest generation, it was the party line, it was the radio. They really didn't grow up with the kinds of technology influence that we feel. Baby boomers. In many ways, baby boomers were the beta testers. Remember VCRs? And the old joke about the flashing 12? You know, I remember the first personal